A medieval serf didn't own the field he worked. The lord owned the land. The serf just got permission to farm it, in exchange for handing over a fixed share of what he grew every single season for his entire life. He could work harder. He could get better at farming. He could pass the exact same arrangement down to his kids. What he could never do was reach a point where he simply owned a field outright and stopped paying. The toll wasn't a phase. The toll was the whole system. Now look at your bank statement. Software you don't own, just rent access to forever. A car with heated seats you already paid for, that some manufacturers now charge a monthly fee to switch on. A house you may never own outright in a growing number of neighborhoods because the landlord isn't a person anymore. It's a fund. We didn't bring back lords. We just gave the same arrangement a much friendlier name, the subscription. Economists have a specific term for income that comes from owning or controlling something and charging other people to access it, instead of income that comes from actually producing something new. It's called rent in a technical sense, and an economy that increasingly runs on it is called a rentier economy. And once you know what to look for, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Let's start with the most obvious one, software. There used to be a very simple deal. You bought a program once on a disk, and it was yours forever. You could use it for 10 years and owe the company nothing further. That model is nearly extinct now. The subscription economy, software, streaming, meal kits, fitness apps, was worth somewhere around $600 billion in 2025, and it's growing at close to 20% a year. The average person now juggles somewhere between 5 and 7 active subscriptions at once. Almost every business you interact with has quietly rebuilt itself around one core insight. A customer who pays forever is worth more than a customer who pays once. Wait, isn't that just normal business? Companies want recurring revenue. It is normal business. That's exactly the point. It's not a conspiracy. It's just an incentive followed all the way to its logical conclusion. And the conclusion is a world where fewer and fewer things are ever actually yours. So where does the actual toll get collected? Let's go somewhere that sounds nothing like a subscription on the surface, because this is where the pattern gets uncomfortable: your doctor's office. For most of the last century, a majority of American physicians owned their own practice. It was the default. That has completely inverted. As of the most recent data, over 80% of physicians in the U.S. are now employed by a hospital system, a private equity firm, an insurer, or some other corporate entity, rather than running their own independent practice. Private equity ownership specifically is still a modest slice of the overall pie, somewhere around 6 to 7% of physicians nationally. But that national number hides the real story, because in specific specialties, the ones with the most reliable, recurring billing, dermatology, gastroenterology, ophthalmology, anesthesiology, emergency medicine, private equity's local market share regularly exceeds 30%, and in some markets tops 50%. So if I go to the ER, there's a real chance the doctor doesn't even work for the hospital anymore. Increasingly, yes. The hospital owns the building. A private equity firm owns the physician group providing the actual care inside it. Neither of them is technically the entity billing you. Multiple tolls, multiple owners, one patient standing in the middle of all of it. And here's the part that matters more than the ownership statistic itself. Research on these acquisitions has found that once a practice gets bought out, physicians frequently see their own income go down, even while patients see prices go up. That's not what happens when a business gets more productive. That's what happens when a business gets better at extracting a toll from a captive customer who has almost nowhere else to go in a medical emergency. You don't get the comparison shop mid-heart attack. Then there's the one people usually bring up first when this topic comes up: housing. And here the story is genuinely more complicated than the headlines suggest. So let's be precise about it. Nationally, large institutional investors, the Wall Street funds people picture when they imagine corporate landlords, actually own a fairly small slice of America's single-family homes, generally estimated somewhere between 1 and 3% of the total housing stock. That's a real number, and it's smaller than a lot of viral posts imply. But national averages hide local reality. In roughly 20 major metro areas, the ones getting hit hardest by population growth and tight supply, large investor ownership climbs into the double digits, in some cases above 12% of the single-family rental market specifically. And the political reaction has been loud enough that in January of 2026, An executive order was signed specifically targeting large institutional buyers of single-family homes, a fairly rare moment of the government stepping directly into a housing ownership fight. You don't get a headline-grabbing executive order over a phenomenon that's purely a myth. It's concentrated, it's regional, and in the specific places it's happening, it's reshaping who gets to be a homeowner versus who gets to be a permanent tenant. Put those three pieces next to each other: software you'll never fully own, a doctor's visit with a corporate owner standing quietly behind the exam room door, and a starter home that, in a growing number of cities, has effectively been converted into a rental unit for a fund instead of family. And a pattern starts to emerge that has nothing to do with any one industry and everything to do with a shift in what businesses are optimizing for. Owning an asset and charging a toll for access to it is a wonderful business model if you're the one collecting the toll. It's predictable. It doesn't require you to keep inventing something new and better every year. It just requires you to control something people can't easily walk away from and bill them for it on a schedule. A company that sells you a product once has to go earn your business again next year. A company that rents you access has already won next year, the moment you sign up, and most years after that too, as long as you don't cancel. That's the actual mechanism. And it's also exactly what made the feudal system so durable for so many centuries. It wasn't cruelty holding in place, not primarily. It was structure. The serf wasn't trapped because the lord was uniquely evil. He was trapped because the entire arrangement was engineered so that working harder never let him graduate into ownership. The toll was permanent by design, not by accident. So, is this actually the future? Or are we just pattern matching on an old history because it makes a good story? Fair question, and it deserves an honest answer, not just a scarier one. Nobody is being forced into serfdom by decree. Homeownership is still the norm in most of the country. Most positions in most specialties still aren't private equity employees. Most software still has some form of ownership option if you look hard enough. The honest version of this argument isn't feudalism is back. It's narrower and, frankly, more useful. In industry after industry, the economic incentives are quietly tilting away from selling you an asset and toward renting you access to one, because renting is simply more profitable for whoever owns the asset, and profitable incentives tend to win over time unless something actively pushes back against them. Which means the actual takeaway here isn't doom. It's a filter you can start applying to your own life. Look at every recurring charge you pay, every single one, and ask a simple question about each. Am I renting access to something I could realistically work toward owning outright instead? Or is this genuinely a service, something that only exists because someone else is doing ongoing work for me? A gym membership is a service. Someone's maintaining the equipment and the building. A mortgage payment is a path toward an asset that eventually becomes entirely yours. A subscription to software that replaced a program you used to just buy once, that one's worth a second look. So is a health plan that's quietly funneling you toward a corporate-owned practice instead of an independent one, if a cheaper direct pay option actually exists nearby. The lords didn't win because peasants were foolish. They won because the toll was built into the structure, and most people were simply never shown the exit. The one real advantage you have that a medieval serf never did is that most of these modern tolls, unlike a feudal land grant, actually do have an exit, an ownership path that still exists if you go looking for it before the convenient, recurring, forever toll option becomes the only one left on the shelf. If you want the full breakdown on which everyday subscriptions are actually worth it and which ones are quietly the worst return on money you'll spend all year, let me know in the comments and I'll make it the next one.